We repeat what we don't repair. I've said it before and I'll continue to say it again and again because it's just true. When we don't do the work to repair the situations from our past that create some of the dysfunctional patterns we currently have in our life, we will continue to repeat the pattern and therefore continue to get the results that we don't want until we repair those problems from the past. Welcome to my channel. My name is Heather and I'm a relationship and empowerment coach, and I love working with people to help them discover blind spots and barriers they put in their own way that stop them from having the type of life and love that they truly desire. In service of that today, we're going to complete our conversation around attachment styles and talk about what you can do to change some of those destructive patterns that really stop you from having the type of relationship you truly want. As a quick reminder, attachment styles influence the way that we connect with and bond with other people, basically how we give and receive love. For those with a secure attachment style, they tend to have an easier time in relationships than those of us with an insecure attachment style. So the work we're going to talk about today is focused on how do we transform, shift, and change some of our insecure attachment style behaviors so that we can lean more towards a secure attachment style. As a side note, if you haven't already watched my other videos on attachment styles, you may want to start there, especially if you're new to the attachment styles conversation. It's a lot of information to take in, and so making sure that you have a clear understanding of all the different pieces before you start looking at how you can change your attachment styles would be a really important thing to remember. So let's dive in. Remembering that we're all born with a need for connection, it's important to think about the way that our parents responded to or didn't respond to our needs when we were younger, whether they were consistent or not. That really lays the foundation for what our attachment style ends up being later in life. If they were consistent and attuned in their responses to our needs, you were likely to develop a secure attachment style. If they were inconsistent in their responses to you and not necessarily attuned to what your needs were, you're more likely to develop the insecure attachment styles, or one of the insecure attachment styles. If you develop a secure attachment style, you generally feel safe in the world and trusting. Relationships are safe, your needs matter, and getting your needs met is actually your right. That's a basic part of what happens with the secure attachment style. If you develop an insecure attachment style, you basically learn not those things, that you have to struggle in some way to get your needs met. You may wonder why it's so hard to figure out how to change these attachment styles. Well, it's because what you learned about having to struggle to get your needs met doesn't exist as a memory. It actually exists in your nervous system. It was happening at such a young age, your brain hadn't developed that part of itself yet. So it was really internalizing all of this in your nervous system because it started out really being about your survival. That means your reactions and triggers exist as an instinct rather than a thought or memory. So shifting those things in the moment is really challenging. Just like if you ever have tried to change the way you breathe, if you've started a yoga practice and they want you to breathe differently, lots of us really only breathe sort of in the top half of our lungs. And when you start doing yogic practices, you can really start focusing on using your whole lungs, and that can be challenging for people, and certainly not something that you just automatically flip a switch and then start doing consistently. It's something that takes time, it takes intentionality and focus, something and a commitment to a practice to start changing that. It's the same thing with changing these attachment style behaviors. So how does this translate into adult relationships? Well, you have ingrained and instinctive reactions inside of relationships when it comes to how you relate to connection and intimacy. For example, anxious attachment style folks tend to crave intimacy, and they can be hyper vigilant when it comes to the connection in their relationship, being very sensitive to shifts and changes in their partner's behavior or demeanor, essentially for fear that it means that they're going to be abandoned, that the relationship will end, or their partner will be pulling away. And that would be an example of what an instinctive reaction would be for someone with an anxious attachment style, that hypervigilance, and how that turns into sometimes ruminating or obsessing about what's going on in a relationship. For an avoidant attachment style person, they would have an instinct that might be to pull away whenever whenever there's been an experience of intimacy or connection. It's not necessarily even in the moment sometimes when there's intimacy and connection. Sometimes it can be after a really positive experience of intimacy and connection that there can be this instinctive need to pull back, withdraw, disappear, find space, spend time by themselves. That would be an instinctive reaction they would have potentially to the experience of intimacy and closeness. And for disorganized attachment style, there's instinctive reactions that just happen, would be really unbalanced, that swing back and forth between the anxious attachment style tendencies and the avoidant style tendencies, that come here, go away experience that they feel. That would all be the instinctive stuff that they have to start working at to try to disrupt or interrupt in order to start creating changes in their relationships. Noticing these instinctive reactions isn't necessarily easy. It's happening while your nervous system is dysregulated. It's happening as your nervous system is becoming dysregulated. Your anxious attachment style or avoidant attachment style or disorganized attachment style instincts are starting to kick in. And so being able to pull those apart, slow that whole process down, and interrupt the pattern as it's happening can be really complicated. So for example, with an anxious attachment style person, noticing their reaction of hypervigilance when it happens, like as it's happening, recognizing, oh, this is happening, recognizing this is an attachment style behavior, one of the ones that I really don't want to do anymore, I need to shift it. Taking a deep breath, reminding yourself that you're safe in the relationship and that you can trust your partner, self-soothing to calm your nervous system, taking some deep breaths, whatever that looks like for you, and then taking a different action. So doing something different, trusting that your partner is not running away from you, trusting that you're safe in the relationship, reminding yourself of those things in the moment. And then if you didn't catch yourself in time, if you had the reaction, it's going back and cleaning up any of the mess that you may have made or any of the impact that you had by acting out your anxious attachment style behaviors. For an avoidant attachment style person, it would be noticing the reaction of needing space, recognizing that in the moment, that this is, my avoidant attachment style in action, and reminding yourself that it's safe to be in connection with people, that you are safe to be connected, intimate, bonded with people, and that that's okay, that you have nothing to worry about. Taking time to self-soothe, calm yourself, calm your nervous system, and then again, taking a different action. Or if you didn't catch yourself in time, cleaning that mess up. So if you didn't notice that you were having this I need to pull away reaction in time, and you followed through with pulling away, it's then having a conversation with your partner or the person that you're in the relationship with to say, hey, I just noticed that I did that thing and I'm really sorry. What I need right now is a little bit of space, and then I'm going to come back. Don't worry, I'm not running away. Some version of that. And then repeat. It's a practice of doing this over and over again. The same thing for someone with a disorganized attachment style. It's noticing the reaction as it's happening, recognizing what the behaviors are, and then altering the action, taking a different action, doing something different to interrupt the pattern, and repeating over and over and over again. Because this is an instinctive reaction to connection that you have, and it's been developing your whole life in your nervous system, when you try to interrupt this cycle, you're trying to interrupt years and years and years of programming. It's almost like having a superhighway in your mind of this is the pattern of behavior that you have, and then trying to create a divergent path off of that superhighway into something new. It's not an easy thing to shift a pattern like that quickly. It takes intentionality, it takes focus and awareness to be conscious of, oh yeah, I have this pattern of behavior in a superhighway. It's totally clear in my mind, this is how I do things. And then taking a different action, turning a different direction to do something different. It's definitely not easy. And if you're up for the task of changing this distorted reaction that you have towards the need for connection, there's a few different things that you can do. There's definitely some specific strategies for each of the different attachment styles, but there's also some basic and foundational practices that you can create for yourself that will make a difference regardless of what attachment style you have. Some of the foundational practices that you can take on to change and transform your attachment style include becoming really aware of what your needs in a relationship are and then sharing that information with your partner. It's really important to be honest with yourself about what you'll need in a relationship to be happy. If you need a lot of connection and attention, trying to pretend that you don't need that because you don't want to sound needy or clingy, it's really setting you and your partner up for failure in the relationship. If they don't know what they're getting into and you're not being honest with yourself about what you actually need, you'll never be happy or satisfied in a relationship if you're not getting those needs met. So sharing that information once you know it with your partner is a really important step. Starting to practice becoming aware of what your reactions are or what your protest behavior is when your attachment style is activated or triggered, and share that information with your partner. If you can share that information with them so you're both practicing recognizing when the attachment style is triggered and creating some safe agreements about how you're going to share that information with each other in the moment, can be really helpful in starting to interrupt the flow of that pattern, because it is a flow. It just will go and cycle if you're not interrupting it. So having two people paying attention to it instead of just you can be really helpful. Practice taking responsibility when you are triggered. You will get triggered. It's just part of the deal. Even after you've done a lot of work to change your attachment style and lean more towards that secure attachment style behavior pattern, you will still find yourself triggered at some stages. Taking responsibility for when that's happened and the impact your behaviors have on your partner or your friend or the relationship itself is really important. And then taking the time and doing the work to repair any ruptures or breaks in the connection and in the trust of the relationship will be really important. Journaling is another activity you can try in order to start shifting some of these behaviors. Journaling is an activity that lots of people don't enjoy doing. Somehow writing it down makes it real in a different way than just thinking about it. It can feel time-consuming and kind of pointless, but the act of writing out what you're thinking and feeling helps integrate that information in your brain in a different way than just thinking about it, talking about it, or typing it out. So taking the time to write down what you're noticing, any new discoveries, what your experiences are as you try to interrupt this pattern and explore new behaviors, like what it felt like in your body, what the results were, etc. That's really helpful. It becomes a critical part of the healing process and will really help to integrate all of the learning as you're healing and as you're making these changes. Learn about your nervous system. That's another thing that's really important here. Learning to recognize what it feels like when you feel safe or regulated in your body, as well as what it feels like when you don't feel safe or when your nervous system is dysregulated, will be really helpful. This will be the first place that you notice the instinctive reaction at play. It happens in your body first, essentially. Anxious attachment styles will likely have more visible cues to dysregulation, so it may be easier to spot. For the avoidant attachment style, they've become really good at disconnecting from feeling in their body and from being in their body, so it may be a little harder for them to identify what their internal experience is. Regardless, they are having an experience in their nervous system, and learning how to recognize what it is and when it's happening will be a critical part of being able to start transforming and interrupting these patterns. And then finally, for your foundational practices, developing a practice that helps you regulate your nervous system will be really important too. These can be things like meditation, EFT tapping or emotional freedom technique tapping meditation if you've not tried that. Yin style yoga practices that are not elevating your heart rate but are allowing you to be relaxed in your body can be really helpful. Deep breathing exercises and different techniques are also very helpful for helping to regulate the nervous system. And sensory awareness exercises that can pull you back into your body. Essentially, you want to create for yourself the experience of feeling safe and calm in your body. That's what a regulated nervous system feels like. And of course, each attachment style has specific practices that they can take on. So let's start with anxious attachment style and what some of the things you can do if you deal with this attachment style in your life to start making some changes. First, especially if you're at the beginning stages of your healing journey, avoiding dating people who are avoidant attachment style is really important. Their need for distance and tendency towards creating space will trigger you endlessly. So this means being really honest with yourself if you see any avoidant type red flags, even if you really like them or think that you have a lot of potential with this person. If they are avoidant and not doing their work, or at the beginning stages of doing their work, this will be a very complicated and challenging relationship with likely not having a good outcome. Also, for the anxious attachment style, at the beginning stages of something, whether you're trying to build a romantic relationship and find an intimate partner, or if you're looking to expand your friendship network, keeping your options open is really helpful to stop you from getting hyper-focused and obsessing about one particular person or one particular relationship. So helping to keep that scarcity mindset at bay and keep you occupied can be really helpful until you've really started to develop the trust that's necessary in the relationship to start feeling safe, which is really what you need. And finally, accepting that your nervous system recognizes being in relationships that have attachment style drama as normal. So doing something different will occur as not normal to your nervous system. So it may be reactive. Your nervous system is used to being in relationships with things like drama and mixed messages and worrying about abandonment and feeling like you don't measure up, worrying about having your needs met and feeling disregarded or diminished, gaslighting. All of those things are normal experiences inside of an anxious attachment style relationship. So choosing to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't respond that way, so if you get into a relationship with someone who is a secure attachment style person, they won't respond the same way that you might be used to, and that can leave you feeling like this is really boring, or I'm not attracted to them. And that might not be what's actually going on. It may be that your nervous system is just so accustomed to being in a dysregulated state when you're in a relationship that being in a calm state is just unrecognizable. And so it's important to start paying attention to that concept too. Next on the list, we have avoidant attachment style. And for this crew of people, getting really clear with themselves at the beginning stages of their journey about the type of people that they tend to get involved with would be really important. Again, choosing to date someone who has an anxious attachment style or who is at the beginning stages of doing their work on their attachment style will just be a recipe for disaster. Their need for closeness and their tendency to pull for that and get upset when they don't get it will just trigger your need for space and distance and make it challenging for you to start working through in a safe way what your instinctive reactions are. As well, if you haven't healed from the core wounding that causes avoidant attachment style, getting into relationships with someone you know is going to need more than what you can give isn't really fair to them. Next, learning to recognize and stop acting on the strategies you use to create distance will be really helpful here too. So things like avoiding communication, especially after an intimate experience, engaging with people who aren't emotionally available, like they're married or they live elsewhere, or they have so much going on in their life that they're not really available to get involved in a relationship. Keeping secrets, sending mixed messages, not being straight about what's really going on for you. Focusing on the perceived problems with the other person instead of looking for the good stuff, or staying hung up on an ex, keeping you unavailable for new connections. Those are all strategies that may show up for an avoidant attachment style person. So starting to recognize them at play can be really helpful. Getting that independence and self-reliance are two different things. Being independent and being able to stand on your own 2 feet is great and actually a really important part of life. Being fully self-reliant, so doing everything by yourself and not allowing for contribution, not allowing people in, that isn't necessarily healthy in building relationships or going through your life that way. We need connection. We need people. So learning how to allow people in is really important to an overall happy, satisfying experience of life. And finally, with the avoidant attachment style, learning that the problem isn't necessarily over there with them and then continuing to search for the one is really important here too. The avoidant attachment style has a tendency to do that as a way of keeping them out of relationships. This notion that if I can just find that one right person, then everything will be fine. That's not actually how it works. I mean, of course, it's true that there are people that you're not attracted to and that just aren't a fit. Absolutely. But the assumption that the reason you don't want to be in the relationship is because they're not the one, that's not necessarily reliable as a way to determine whether or not the relationship is the right one for you. It's important to be able to discern between your attachment style and whether it's a pattern for keeping distance and creating space for yourself in the avoidant attachment style behaviors. And finally, in relation to specific things you can do for the different attachment styles, we'll look at disorganized attachment style. Being as this attachment style tends to have a combination of both avoidant and anxious behaviors, they would be able to use a combination of the avoidant and anxious style behavior interrupters. And as I've mentioned in a previous video, this attachment style often has a lot going on from their past that may be best supported by working with a trained professional, especially someone who specializes in attachment therapy and trauma therapy. That may be the best and fastest way for someone with this attachment style to create the changes that they're actually looking for. Now, listen, I get this is a lot of work. If you're feeling overwhelmed or disheartened or defeated at this point, it wouldn't really be a surprise. Starting to do this type of work, especially the nervous system type of work, is really hard. We tend to come from a world that focuses on the thinking mind as opposed to doing the mind-body connection. And so learning how to be in your body is not necessarily as natural or easy as we might like to think. You're looking at a 10 out of 10 avoidant attachment style person over here with a dash of disorganized thrown in for good measure. And I can tell you firsthand, this work is hard work. It's confusing, it's uncomfortable, and it requires that you look at things that you never have before. And that can be really uncomfortable to do. So it's not surprising if you're having resistance or if you're feeling overwhelmed here. And quite frankly, doing this work on your own is virtually impossible, or at least you're making it way harder on yourself than it needs to be. And it'll take way longer than necessary if you try this route. I know it's really common for people to think like, this is about me, it's in my head, I should be able to fix it. But that's not actually real. That's really kind of a false nomer. Just like you wouldn't sort of look at, oh, I have a broken arm or some other major physical issue happening in my body, like a heart attack or a stroke. You wouldn't like try to just solve that by yourself. You would go and work with people who are experienced and trained in how to deal with those specific things, even though they're internal. People with proper training are the ones that you trust to deal with those things. It should be the same way when it goes with your emotional injuries too. This is coming from emotional injuries, emotional wounding. So working with someone who knows how to deal with this is really helpful, and you deserve it. You deserve to be supported in that way. Also, transforming your attachment style requires something called co-regulation. So along with needing to learn about your own nervous system and what it feels like to be in your body and feel safe, which is a regulated nervous system versus the dysregulated nervous system where you don't feel safe, learning how to co-regulate with another person is a necessary part for transforming your attachment styles. And that's literally impossible to do by yourself. Finding a safe person, like a trained professional or somebody else in your life that you know is secure in their attachment style and is comfortable having conversations like this, is really important to help you understand what it feels like to be connected to another person and feel safe. And then you can start to develop that as the new default setting as opposed to the dysregulated nervous system state that you tend to be in when it comes to being connected in relationships. That about wraps it up for our talk about attachment styles and how to heal your particular attachment style. I hope you found value today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. That way you'll never miss another video. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.